Boxy, Boxy, we're live. Hi, this is Larry Harnish, and this is Boxy. And Boxy is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. Aren't you, Boxy? Yes. This is the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case for May 2025. It's only Black Dahlia stuff. I have another session that I do on the third Tuesday of the month. That is George Hodel and Steve Hodel. Okay, because I was getting too many George Hodel and Steve Hodel questions, and so I split them off into something else. So, and again, this is Ask Me Anything. Okay, questions. Not. This is more of an observation. Yeah, don't do that. Okay, no, don't do that. And why am I doing this? Who am I, and why am I doing this in the first place? I started researching the Black Dahlia case in 1996, and I initially thought it was my obligation to try to set the record straight on the Black Dahlia case. And I realized eventually that people don't want the record set straight. And the most recent show on the Black Dahlia case convinced me even more that I'm just a lot happier not doing them. So there are problems in the true crime industrial complex, and I just am happier if I don't participate then. So I don't do interviews anymore, with a very rare exception. I do these instead. And I will tell you, I've got a lot of questions. I don't know if I'll be able to get to them all today. I will do my best. Priority is going to go to, I've got a set of questions from a researcher for a Japanese television show. And I said, well, I don't do interviews, but if you send me your questions, I'll do them on the Ask Me Anything. So I'll do that. And then I got questions for a high school research project. And I said, well, I don't think it's appropriate for high school students to study the Black Dahlia case. And I made that decision a long time ago, back when my son was in high school. And it's like, there's some things that are just not appropriate for high school students. So I said, well, I won't do an interview, but I will put your questions on the Ask Me Anything. So those are gonna get priority. So that's what will be happening today. I will try to alternate between those questions and questions from the chat. Again, I'll be doing well. If I get to them all, I'll be very happy. I might not. Anyway, the next George Hodel session is, what is it? May 20th. I think I said May 20th. Yeah, May 20th. And then the next one on the Dahlia is going to be June 3rd, 10 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and Instagram. And by the way, now that I'm doing Instagram again, you might wonder, what is Larry Harnish looking at? Okay, I've got Instagram over here. I have YouTube over here. I have my cheat sheet up here, and I have to watch the chat to make sure trolls don't show up, because I always get some trolls. So if you're wondering what is going on with Larry Harnish, what is he looking at? That's the explanation. I'm trying to watch 4 things at once, and it's a bit much. So that's kind of what I'm doing on first order of business, the book. Okay, I just finished my semi-annual read through of the book. What I do, my working method is to, every 6 months, I go rent a little cottage on the Central Coast. It's a block from the ocean, and I read through the manuscript completely. And the reason I do that is because by the time I have finished a chapter, it is so burned into my brain that when I read it, my mind kind of wanders. And so forgetting what I have written is part of my method. I need to put something away and not look at it and whatnot. Oh, good. I'm going to get to your questions. Thank you for joining us, Masako. Thank you. So it went well. I'm pleased with how it's going. There are a couple of chapters that I'm particularly pleased with, and some that is like, well, okay, things I needed to fiddle with, but basically it's okay. Again, I have one chapter I need to go back and finish that deals with Virginia Short and Adrian West, and I put that aside when I was working on it, and I haven't gone back to it, but I need to do that. Anyway, um, so that's kind of the report on the book. I am now in part two, which is the first part of the book is the life of Elizabeth Short, and that's done, except for this one chapter. The second part of the book is the criminal investigation, and I'm right now talking about the autopsy. So I've been spending a lot of time reading up on autopsies and whatnot. So that's what I've been doing, and that's the status of the book. Okay, speaking of books, there is a new book coming out called Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel. It's not published yet. It comes out later this year. I got access to it through NetGalley. And if you are not familiar with NetGalley, it is where you can get advanced review copies of books. And that's where I have gotten a couple. I've gotten a couple of books to review. And this thing popped up. Oh, it's a Black Dahlia book. Let's see. And as soon as I saw the book blurb, I knew what was going to happen. It's about it's like Elizabeth Short and Lila Welsh. And if you don't know, if you're not in this in the very rabbit hole parts of the Black Dahlia case, you might not have heard of Lila Welsh. Lila Welsh was a woman, and so I knew immediately, oh, this is going to be Carl Balsiger, and indeed it is. Okay, who is Carl Balsiger? Well, if you go through the list of suspects and you treat it like a game of Clue, if you go through like Wikipedia, there's a lot of suspects in the Black Dahlia case, not counting Jacob Edward Fisk. But anyway, Balsiger was one of them. And there is this attempt to link Carl Balsiger, who befriended Elizabeth Short right before she went down to San Diego in like the last month of her life. They crossed paths, and he helped her out a little bit, and then he never saw her again. But there is this attempt to make Carl Balsiger into the killer based on the premise that he knew this murder victim in Kansas City, which was in the world of the Junior Crime Stoppers, just like the murder of Elizabeth Short. Well, it's not. And so I knew right away, it's like, oh, this is going to be a non-starter. And indeed it isn't. How can I be so sure that Carl Balsiger didn't kill Lila Welsh? Well, he was in the Army. She was killed in March 1941. I have his service records. Where was Carl Balsiger in March 1941? He was at McCord Field, Washington. So no. So this writer, Eli Frankel, has spent all this time interviewing Balsiger's relatives and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, he's a non-starter, and it's basically somebody who gets an idea and is very zealous about it and slams everything that doesn't fit and just kind of smushes it. Well, I'm going to make this fit. Okay. Balsiger was a baker. He was not a butcher. No, he was a baker. How do I know? It's on his service records. Baker. Okay. Baker is a completely different set of skills than butcher. They're different. Okay. Plus, did I mention that he was at McCord Field, Washington at the time? Anyway, the Lila Welch murder is a really hinky one. It was like she was killed by an intruder who grabbed a log out of a stack of firewood and beat her to death with it. So is that anything like the Elizabeth Short murder? No, not at all. And there's something about it in Boxy here by Frank Jemison that you can freely ignore it. Anyway, so no, he's got, Eli Frankel has some good information, but what's exasperating is that, and he refers to me a couple of times. He refers to, and he's gotten some stuff from me because I recognized, and I didn't read the whole book. The first thing I did was I looked at the acknowledgments and it's like, okay, fine. And then I looked at the sources. I went to the back of the book and said, okay, where does he get his information? It's like, okay, he got this, he got that. Here's Larry Harnish. Okay, fine. He doesn't mention Hodel at all. Because it's an ebook, you can search through it. So I searched for Hodel. And it's like, there's no mention of Hodel at all. Anyway, but what's exasperating is that somebody can get some pretty good information and totally botch the interpretation of it. And I stopped reading pretty early on. He's talking about the crime scene, and he says, well, the responding police officers moved Elizabeth Short's body like 10 feet. And it's like, no, I don't need to read any more of this damn book. Anyway, it's coming out later this year. I wouldn't. Oh, and I should mention also the mysterious Sergeant Chuck. Another thing that this writer, Eli Frankel, tries to do is he tries to smash things together. Okay. There was a sergeant, the mysterious Sergeant Chuck, which is in U-Boxy. There's a Sergeant Chuck. And there were all these rumors that Sergeant Chuck, the mysterious and violent Sergeant Chuck, had shacked up with Elizabeth Short, and she reported him to his superiors and got him transferred overseas and blah, 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 blah. And so Eli Frankel decides, well, Sergeant Chuck is really Lieutenant Balsiger. And it's like, no. Let me point out that the mores of the country were extremely different. People generally didn't shack up until like the 60s, kind of the part of the free love and the hippie movement. But I absolutely get, well, first of all, we know Elizabeth Short lived in the civilian dormitory on Camp Kill. She did not shack up with anybody. Second of all, if Lieutenant Balsiger wanted to keep his lieutenant's bars, he would not be shacking up with some random woman. No, that is not how you stay an officer. And he finally ended up, I think he was a major in the Army Reserve, something like that. Anyway, so it's just exasperating for somebody who actually has some pretty good information and just botches it. So anyway, let me go. Masako, since you're here, let me take one of your questions, okay? Which is here. Let's see, where I'm going through my cheat sheet. Okay. If possible, I would like to ask you some questions as an expert on the Black Dahlia case. Thank you. The 1949 grand jury investigated and criticized the LAPD in their final report. Did they point out corruption only within the vice squad, or did they also criticize the homicide department for failing to catch criminals? Or was their criticism directed at the entire LAPD? I still do not fully understand exactly what the grand jury highlighted and what significance it carried. Well, you've come to the right place, because Boxy is the grand jury files in the Black Dahlia case. Okay. It's a complicated story, Masako. I will try to summarize it very quickly. Here's what happened. In 1948, this magazine was published, the Black Dahlia Murders. Okay. Can you see that? The Black Dahlia Murders. Okay. This magazine was published, and a guy living in Florida saw the article, and he wrote to one of the people mentioned in the article, who was Paul DeRiver, the LAPD psychiatrist. And he wrote a letter and he said, hey, I've got some information on the Black Dahlia case, yada, yada, yada. Okay, fine. Now, what should have happened at that point is that Paul DeRiver should have taken the letter or the information that he had and gone to homicide. He should have, because he's not a homicide detective. He should have gone to the homicide division, gone to the head of homicide, Jack Donahoe, or to the lead detectives, Harry Hansen and Finus Brown. And he said, hey, I got a letter from this guy. He might be a good suspect. Here it is, and I'm done with it. And you let it go. He should have done that. He didn't do that. And very, very bad things happened. Paul DeRiver initiated a conversation with this guy, Leslie Dillon. Okay. And DeRiver eventually, without telling the homicide division, he didn't tell those guys, I am going to lure Leslie Dillon out to Los Angeles, not to LA, of course, but to Las Vegas. And I'm going to enlist the gangster squad to go up to Las Vegas and pick him up. And we're going to question him and interrogate him and all that stuff. And so they get down to Banning, and they get into like a tourist court or a dude ranch or something like that. And they start interrogating him. And it doesn't go well. You know, DeRiver is not a homicide detective. And so eventually Leslie Dillon either sails a postcard out the window or leaves it when they take him to a meal. Help, help, I'm being held by, get me a lawyer. And so the whole thing blows up. And it is a huge black eye for the police department. And I'm leaving out a lot of stuff because it's a complicated and really stupid thing. DeRiver decided that Leslie Dillon had a split personality, and under this split personality, killed Elizabeth Short. And I won't. Anyway, it was a huge debacle, and it got a lot of bad publicity because it was a horrendous screw up. Because DeRiver didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so what happened is, hey, let's take a look at the Leslie Dillon, this incident with Leslie Dillon. Let's look at that. Let's talk to the gangster squad. Let's talk to Paul DeRiver. And that's mostly what's in Boxy here is Leslie Dillon. The final report. Now, the grand jury, the way the grand juries work is they investigate various crimes. Prosecutors come to the grand jury. Grand jury proceedings, by the way, are secret. Okay. So when somebody tells you, oh, it's a secret grand jury file, yeah, they are secret. That's how they all are. Grand juries do a lot of things. A prosecutor might present evidence to a grand jury that results in an indictment, okay, which is an accusation. Okay. In this case, I don't think the grand jury was looking to indict anybody. They just wanted to know what the hell happened. And there are comments in the interviews in Boxy that they think the actual LAPD detectives did a good job. They were doing fine. It was just this weird, stupid thing with Paul DeRiver. And beyond that, the grand jury did a lot of things. I don't know everything that the grand jury looked at. I only know this stuff. And so in terms of the homicide division was fine. Good detectives, Harry Hansen and Finest Brown were good. There's no reason to question them at all about anything. In terms of Brenda Allen and the Vice Squad, that's a whole different subject. And I'm not even sure. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't even know if the grand jury looked at the Brenda Allen's case. I don't know. Brenda Allen, the Hollywood Madam, ended up going to jail. So, she never named names. Okay. Let me go back and get one of the live questions here. Is the story true that Elizabeth told the bus station employee that she was going to go to Alaska? No, that was a false identification. That was somebody else. The Railway Express agent was sure that it was Elizabeth Short. He was sure that Red Manley was with her. He identified Red Manley in a lineup. Yep, that's Red Manley for sure. And at that point, the woman who had actually checked her suitcases to go to Alaska showed up and said, no, that was not Red Manley. That was not Elizabeth Short. That was me. And so the whole thing, again, there were a lot of people who thought they saw Elizabeth Short during her so-called missing week, and this guy was one of them. So no, the story was total BS. The guy, he legitimately thought that he had seen Elizabeth Short, so he wasn't faking it. But no, that was not Elizabeth Short at all. Okay, let me go down to the first question from Jesus. Dear Mr. Harnish, my name is Jesus. I'm a high school student based in Washington. I understand you're a very busy person, but if I could have just a moment of your time, I would appreciate it. For my English class, we've been assigned a major research project on a conspiracy theory or urban legend. Naturally, my exploration led me to the infamous Black Dahlia case and subsequently to your extensive and insightful research. One component of this project is to interview an expert in the field, and after your reading your work, I knew I had found someone with a deep and compelling understanding of the case. Why, thank you, Jesus. If you're open to it, I would be incredibly grateful to ask you a few questions for my project. The first one is, what initially drew you to the Black Dahlia case? What inspired you to devote so much time and energy to uncovering the truth about Elizabeth Short's murder? Okay. Very quickly. Back in 1996, I had always wanted to, when I was in my 20s, I was very under the influence of Raymond Chandler. I thought Raymond Chandler was a great writer. Um, until I read Maltese Falcon, and it's like, okay, wow. But anyway, so I had always wanted to, in the back of my mind, before I became a writer, was to write a mystery. And so I had this idea for a mystery plot. I had some free time, so I had the idea for a mystery that involved an old for a plot device involved an old unsolved murder. And I thought, oh, there's the Black Dahlia case. So, but I didn't know anything about it. And again, this is 1996, so there's no Google, there's no internet, there's no nothing. So it was all old school microfilm and newspapers and stuff like that. And I realized, because this was in the summer of 1996, I realized that the 50th anniversary was coming up in a few months. And I suggested to one of the city editors at the Los Angeles Times, hey, the 50th anniversary of the Black Dahlia case is coming up. It might be a good story. And so the guy, to his credit, said, hey, great idea. Do you want to do it for us? And I said, sure. And so I did. And what he outlined and what I ended up doing was totally different. What he outlined was, a quick walk through the clips and that sort of thing. And I realized in reading what had already been written, the LA Times had done that story. That the LA Times had done that story 2 or 3, 4 times. And I really didn't have any interest in, that story's been done. And so what I did was I went through the original stories and I made myself a little database of all the people who were mentioned in the original news stories. And then I made a wish list of if I could talk to anybody, who would I interview? And then I made a list of people, and it's like, I'm going to find them dead or alive. And that's what I did. And so what I turned in was a completely different story than what they had in mind. It was very long. It ended up getting cut a lot. And so it was still long. It ran on the front page. Only the second time in the entire history of the LA Times that the Black Dahlia case was on the front page. Only 2 times, and I was one of them. But anyway, so I had so much material left over. And one of the things I did, just besides just talking to the people who had experienced the Black Dahlia case, was to get the modern component. What would a profiler say about it? So I talked to John Douglas, and profiling had a little bit different image in 1996 than it does now, shall we say. So I sent him all the information. I interviewed him, and his first questions were, "What do you know about the neighborhood?" And so I described the neighborhood to him, and he said, "What you're describing, Larry, is this flat open area." And Norton Avenue at that time was wide open. It was a vacant lot. The property all around there is flat. You can see from the crime scene, you can see all the way to the Hollywood. On a clear day, you can see the Hollywood sign, but you could see all the way to a major thoroughfare. And so he said, it's not a good place to leave a body. You're going to get caught. So the killer had a reason for picking that crime scene. And so I began researching the history of the neighborhood. And so it kind of went from there. And I think I've more than answered your question, but it's a good story. It is a good story. And people like to say I'm obsessed, and it's like, I think I call myself dedicated. I do other stuff when I am done for the day. As I said, one of the things I do is forgetting. Forgetting is a big part of my writing technique, was where I will write something and I put it away. People have the idea that I sit around the house with suspenders and a hat and, use a candlestick phone. And it's like, no, it's just one aspect of my life. Okay. Live question here. Let's see. Where am I here? I got to scroll back. Where are you? Yeah. How do you feel about being the Black Dahlia expert? I think this is what you're best known for instead of the LA Times writer. Well, there are a lot of people who tell you I'm not an expert. There are a lot of people who tell you I don't know what I'm talking about, which I find amusing. Uh, but seriously, it's like, um, again, I felt, and I continue to feel, that I have an obligation to set the story straight as much as possible. And as time goes on, the Black Dahlia case becomes more and more folklore. It's what people want to believe, especially when you have a certain retired homicide detective spending the last 22 years um, accusing his father of every unsolved murder on the planet. I mean, Steve Hodel it's his career is convicting his dad of every unsolved murder. And so, yeah. But again, it's like the Eli Frankel book. It's like, it's not that, setting the record straight is, I don't know. That's my thing. So that's how it feels is, sometimes it's exasperating. But I just focus on my book. I work on it. I put it away. I do other stuff. Uh, that's life. Okay. Let's go back to Misako. Let's go to the second question here. I hope Misako, did you understand what I said about the grand jury? Did that make sense to you? Okay. What kind of mutual support system existed between the Vice Squad, Brenda Allen, and her backers at the time? If you are aware of any valuable material, such as research papers on this topic, could you kindly share them with me? Okay. Misako, I am a specialist. I'm not a generalist. I only do the Black Dahlia case. I know a bit about Brenda Allen, but not a lot. Um, if I were going to research the Brenda Allen case, um, I would go to the original newspapers. They're online. They're available here. I don't know, like if you're in Japan, I would think they're available, but newspapers.com has all the 1940 has most of the LA papers from the 1940s. Genealogy Bank has the other ones. So I would do that. I wouldn't bother with any research papers or any books or anything like that. Most of the books about LA crime and scandals and stuff, they're typically very badly researched and written with an agenda. So I wouldn't bother with that stuff. And I enjoy the research. So if I had to recommend anything, it would be going to the original papers, which is what I tell people in the Black Dahlia case when they ask, are there any good books on the Black Dahlia case? Go read the original news stories. They are all online except for the Examiner. The Los Angeles Examiner from January 1947 is missing, as far as I know. It's not on the online archive, but everything else is. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Did the police ever investigate the two men and the woman that showed up at the French house looking for Elizabeth that caused her to panic, hide, and refuse to face them? Maybe. That incident is in the San Diego papers, and there are less of the San Diego papers online than there are with the LA papers. It's just sort of this interesting thing that happened. Elizabeth Short had a lot of stories about how can I put this? Elizabeth Short had a lot of stories. She invented a lot. She was very inventive about her life. And so the police looked at, was there anyone that she was afraid of or anything like that? The main thing about Elizabeth Short when she stayed with the French family is that she had guys showing up all the time. She liked that. And so as soon as she moved in with the Frenches, people started showing up looking for, guys. That's how she was. So that's kind of my take on that. In terms of, I think my recollection of that story is that they came to the door and she like peeked out the curtain or something like that. I think that's all it was. I don't think it was any more sinister than that. Okay. Let's go back to, anyway, Misako, I can't give you a good answer on all the Brenda Allen stuff because that's not my specialty. That's not my strength. I would suggest you go to the newspaper articles from the time period. They're online. Okay. Jesus. I understand you identify Walter Bailey as the prime suspect. Okay. I never used the term prime suspect. Never. Never. I never used the term. That is an invention of Steve Hodel. I don't use the term prime suspect ever. Um, and this is a Steve Hodel question, but sorry. With all due respect to Mr. Hodel, I'm curious what led you to disagree with Steve Hodel's conclusions. Was there something in his theory that didn't sit right with you, or was it the evidence that led you in a different direction? Yes, both of those. Steve Hodel published Black Dahlia Avenger in 2003, wrote it in total secrecy. Um, and I got in, I'm skipping a lot of stuff because I don't want to spend a lot of time on Black Dahlia Avenger. Somebody handed me a copy of it. So what do you think? And I got, I started reading and thought, well, okay. The description of the Biltmore, the lobby of the Biltmore, it's the wrong lobby. What's described in the opening chapter about the lobby of the Biltmore, well, that didn't exist in 1947. So it's already pretty questionable. When I get to the pictures that Steve Hodel says he found in his dad's belongings that are Elizabeth Short. Well, no, they're not. They're obviously not Elizabeth Short. Okay. So it's already very, very sketchy what he's come up with. And, I didn't want to bug Elizabeth Short's family. But because I have been in contact with Elizabeth Short's family, and I didn't want to bug them because this was obviously BS. It was obviously somebody else trying to sell books. But they contacted me. One of Elizabeth Short's nieces said, I took my mom to the grocery store and we saw People magazine. And here's this picture about the Black Dahlia and, Steve Hodel's alleged pictures of Elizabeth Short. And has the world gone crazy? They're not her. And so Elizabeth Short's family issued a statement through me that they're not Elizabeth Short. And Steve went all over the place about, yes, they are. No, they aren't. It doesn't matter. On and on and on and on. But I mean, basically, we're at the point where Steve Hodel will say anything. He has just gone on and on to write all these books and accused his dad of all these murders. So the answer is it's BS from the get-go. The pictures aren't her. And he will phrase it as like, oh, well, Larry Harnish is just jealous because I solved the case and it was my father. And, he's just this amateur detective who's, grabbed some guy and no, I, the great detective, has solved it. So no, his evidence is BS, and I have a whole nother session that I do on Steve Hodel. So I don't want to waste a lot of time on it, but that's the answer. Okay. Let's see. You said that the Short and Bailey families first met at a church in Glendale. Do you know if Elizabeth Short attended the same church? Do you think she could have met Walter there? Okay. Not quite. That's not quite true. Okay. And somebody else about the same thing. So here's a twofer. Okay. Adrian West is Elizabeth Short's brother-in-law, marries Virginia Short. Okay. He lives in the Bay Area. And during World War II, he is sent to USC for training. That makes sense, right? Okay. It turns out that Adrian West is a devout Presbyterian. Okay. Very active in church and all that sort of thing. So being at the University of Southern California and being an active, devout Presbyterian, he goes to the local Presbyterian church, which is just a few blocks south of the USC campus, Vermont Avenue Presbyterian. He starts going there. Okay. So it's Adrian West who goes to this church, Vermont Avenue Presbyterian Church, which doesn't, I think it's been torn down. It hasn't done well. But anyway, he started going there. And the Bailey family, or at least certain members of the Bailey family, also attend that church. So that is and the Bailey family used to live in that neighborhood. They moved over out of there. They moved over I think to the Baldwin Hills and then down to Leimert Park. But at least some members of that family also attended Vermont Avenue Baptist Church. So Adrian West is the connection between the two. What happened then was um, Adrian's getting more training. He gets sent back to MIT for more training. And so who does he meet when he's back at MIT but Virginia Short? And so they hit it off, they get engaged. And then he's put on a ship, and which is ported out here in Southern California. And so they're engaged. So Virginia Short comes out and lives in Los Angeles for the duration of the war. I don't know where she lived, but she attended, like Adrian, she attended Vermont Avenue Presbyterian Church, as at least certain members of the Bailey family also attended that church, Vermont Avenue Presbyterian Church. That's the connection. And then when Virginia Short and Adrian West got married, the marriage was performed by the minister of Vermont Avenue Presbyterian Church. The best man was his friend from the Navy, and the matron of honor was Barbara Lindgren, Walter Bailey's daughter. And so that's the connection. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think, Masako, it's time for you again. Okay. Where are we here? Okay. It is said that the homicide department tirelessly investigated the Black Dahlia case, but was unable to solve it. Was this due to external or internal suppression of the case at some point, or simply too difficult? Yeah. I would strongly, in the strongest possible, say, no, there was no suppression to, we're not going to solve the case, we're going to ignore it or whatever. The Los Angeles, very briefly, Los Angeles after World War II, the homicide rate went up. It had gone down during World War II. But after World War II, the homicide rate went up. And so what happened was other people kept getting killed. And there was, within about a month, I think it was not quite a month, of when Elizabeth Short was killed, Jean French was killed. And so that was another big murder case. People kept getting killed. The problem with the challenge of the Black Dahlia case is that it's an extremely difficult case, in that it's one of a kind. And that's a very hard message for some people to accept. They want to, like Eli Frankel, they want to shove it into a pattern, and it doesn't fit. And I guarantee you, when you look through the autopsy report on Elizabeth Short and you compare it to Jean French, it's night and day. There's no comparison at all. And so it was a challenging case from the get-go, because people say, well, the evidence is missing. Well, there wasn't any. That's the problem. Elizabeth Short was found naked, no clothes, no purse, no jewelry, no nothing. They didn't know who she was. She's just there. And she had not been seen for the previous week. And regardless of what people tell you about the missing week, no, nobody knows where she was. The original detectives never, ever found out where she had been from when Red Manley dropped her off at the Biltmore on the evening of January 9th, and her body was found on January 15th. Nobody knows. No one can tell you with any sort of certainty where she was. Now, that's hard to accept, but that's all true. So she was like missing for a week before she was found. That makes it extremely challenging. And so the combination of it being a tough case and other murders happening. Now, they investigate. They kept that investigation going for a long time. By like the 1950s, Finus Brown went back and interviewed some people in Massachusetts. So they kept working on it for a long time, but they could never practice. They would go through it and go through it again. And when you look at the list of suspects, okay, all of these people were eliminated. They all were. There's no point in going back and trying to make any of them into the killer. They were all eliminated. They were known. They were interviewed. Harry Hansen said, "I know for a fact I never interviewed the killer. I never talked to him. I would be certain of that." Okay, so it was a tough case. So let's see. Okay, where? Let me scroll back here. Bus station, blah blah blah. French house, okay. Met a church. Was the FBI hands off in the murder investigation, leading to? Oh, absolutely. I mean, what you have to understand is it's just the other way around. It's an LAPD case. The FBI doesn't go around investigating random murders. No, it was an LAPD case from the get-go, and they brought in the FBI to do a couple of things. First of all, identify her with the fingerprints, and the crime lab, because the FBI had a more sophisticated crime lab than the LAPD had. What the FBI would do is, as a courtesy for the LAPD, they would conduct interviews. Instead of sending officers, let's say, to Chicago to interview people that she'd known in Chicago, they had FBI agents go on behalf of the LAPD. They would do that kind of thing. But it was really, it was, and when you read the FBI interviews, they're not particularly impressive. And there's this, I will warn you now. One of the interviews in the FBI files is with this guy named Peter Vetcher about his alleged one-night stand with Elizabeth Short at the Hotel Figueroa. Total bullshit. Never happened. He totally, and I have, how do I know? I spent probably a month and a half researching the life of Peter Vetcher. And the guy lied about everything. It's you run into these people who just absolutely make up stuff. So, okay. So yeah. People go, ooh, the FBI file. No, it's really, mostly what's in the FBI file is all this internal debate about which newspapers in LA are friendly to the Bureau and which ones have subversives. That's what's really in there. Okay, back to Jesus. Let's see here. Where am I? Okay, no, Walter Bailey. Okay, what in your opinion was the motive behind the murder? While every killer has their own reasons, I'd love to hear your perspective on what might have driven this particular crime. I don't know. And this is, again, this goes down hard. I mean, I would used to suggest that, again, Elizabeth Short had a lot of stories. She fictionalized her life way before anybody else. And one of her sympathy stories, and she had a whole repertoire of sympathy stories. One of the stories that she had, and when you watch James Ellroy's Feast of Death, I get into that a little bit. But one of her stories was what she was married to a World War II hero, and the guy was killed in the war, and they had a son that died. Okay, none of that was true. None of that was true. But that's what she would say. And with Walter Bailey specifically, he had a son that died, and it was one of the few big remarkable events of his life was the death of this son in a car accident. But I will point out, read Vincent Bugliosi's opening statement in Tate LaBianca. I think I have it on the blog, LA Daily Mirror. I think I posted it. What does he say? What does he tell the jurors with in his opening statement? I don't have to give you a motive. I can suggest one. It will be a powerful, but I don't have to give you a motive. And so I'll say the same thing. I don't have to. A motive can be convincing or not, but the way the court system works, you don't have to give a motive. So, Jesus, there you go. I suppose that's a non-answer, but it's a realistic answer. Okay. Any pictures of Walter Bailey? Yeah, they're around. There are a couple of them around. Let's see. Could it be possible that Short's disappearance was she was already dead? No. And here's why. The autopsy, things happen to the human body once a person is dead, and you can tell pretty much how long they had been deceased. And the conclusion of the autopsy, to the best of my recollection, is that she had been, quote unquote, freshly killed within like the last 12 hours before she was found, probably. That's most likely it. So, yeah. And having read, because I said I'm working on the autopsy now, having read a number of autopsy texts, there's a very clear progression of what happens chemically to the human body when you die. Okay. And they know, the autopsy surgeon knows, okay, it's a chemical process. The chemicals are breaking down in the human body. So if somebody's dead, this happens and this happens and this happens. Okay. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. Let's go back to, okay. Let's go back to Masako. Okay. At that time, was the homicide department entirely clean and free from connections with gangs or other organizations like the Vice Squad? Okay. Here's the thing about organized crime in Los Angeles. It was called, I think it was by Daryl Gates, the Mickey Mouse Mob. Organized crime, the mob, was never rooted as deeply in Los Angeles as it was in, we'll say, Chicago or New York. Why not? Well, couple of reasons. First of all, Los Angeles was at that time was a much smaller city than New York or Chicago. Number one. Number two, Los Angeles is huge. There are multiple jurisdictions. It's you have people think, well, it's just the city of Los Angeles. No, there's the city of Los Angeles. There's the city of Pasadena. There's the city of Long Beach. There's the city of Beverly Hills. There's Glendale. There's all these different, Santa Monica. There's all Burbank. There's all these different separate cities with their own police departments and court, the whole thing. So, as Mickey Cohen used to say, at least in his autobiography, there's too many people to pay off in Los Angeles. And what passed for organized crime, you had the Sicilian mob and you had the Jewish mob. Okay. The Jewish mob would be Mickey Cohen, Bugsy Siegel, people like that. The Sicilian mob would be the Rossellis and Jack Dragna and those guys. And they confined their activities to LA County, the Sunset Strip, stuff like that. When you look at where Mickey Cohen had his haberdashery, I believe that was I think that was in LA. I think that was in LA County. The LAPD was squeaky clean, pretty much. People want the Hollywood trope of, oh yeah, the police are corrupt and on the take. Never on like the matter of, in the manner of, we'll say, Chicago, where you bought your way out of a traffic ticket. That didn't happen. And in fact, what the LAPD used to do is, if they got word that some undesirable crime figure was at the railroad station, they would meet the train and put him on the next train out of town. They really did that. That's not bullshit. They really would. They would meet the train. They'd say, hi, you're going back, go back to where you came from. You're not welcome. So that was, people want to believe that because it's sort of tantalizing and whatnot, but and the mobsters, generally what they did was they killed each other. So it was like, yeah, it was rightly called the Mickey Mouse Mob. And certainly in terms of the homicide division, no. The thing about the homicide division, just in general within police departments, they are the elite. It's hard to become a homicide detective, number one. Number two, you have to be built to handle all the carnage of homicides. They're an elite bunch. They're the cream of the crop in a lot of ways. And so, no. And I will tell you now, from knowing a bunch of homicide detectives, you can't get stuff out of them. They just won't tell you. Regardless of what people want to think, it's like, nah, no. In terms, there was not really organized crime that we think of it in America certainly not on the level of, Detroit or Chicago or New York. No, that just didn't happen. Okay. Let's go back to, let's see. Yeah. Where was I? Do I consider the case unsolvable at this point in time? Well, that depends on how you define unsolvable. Is it going to result in an arrest and conviction? No, that's never going to happen. In terms of will we know what happened? Maybe. But at this point, the thing about solving it to the satisfaction of the LAPD, that's probably not going to happen unless something surfaces that nobody knows about. That could happen. Somebody going through an attic and finding somebody's diary or something like that. That could happen, but otherwise, no. So in terms of the LAPD satisfaction, no. And I was told flat out that when Steve Hodel published Black Dahlia Avenger, the cold case unit looked at his allegations and they would have signed off on it just to get it off the books if it had any validity. It didn't, which makes Steve Hodel very unhappy. Okay, let's see here. Where am I? Why do you think it was so difficult for the police to solve the case? Was the issue a lack of solid evidence, limited resources at the time, or something else entirely? Well, as I said, it was a tough case. When you listen to the statements, when you read the statements in Boxy of the investigating officers, this is a woman who is naked, no clothing, no jewelry, no property of any kind. They didn't know who she was. They had to identify her. Nobody had seen her for a week. That's a tough case. And so I think it was, it would have taken, I think, and I like to say this was a state-of-the-art investigation for 1947. But it was, again, it's one of a kind. There is nothing like it, and I think that's what made it difficult. In terms of evidence, the only evidence they really had was the material that the killer mailed to the Los Angeles Examiner about the time of the inquest, which it was an envelope that had her, it was stuff from her purse. It was her birth certificate, social security card, business cards, her address book, random pieces of paper, some snapshots, stuff like that. That's it. That's all there was. And the envelope was addressed with cutout letters. That's it. That, when people say the evidence is missing, that's the only evidence you've got is what was in that envelope. There's nothing else. Her luggage was at she tucked it at the bus station, so she didn't have it when she was killed. My impression is that at least some of her belongings were returned to the family when the police determined that they didn't need them anymore. So I think it was tough. It was tough from the get-go because, again, you have this body with no identification. So it was tough. And again, she'd been missing for a week. Okay, let's see. This is. Let me take care of. Do I think that the Black Dahlia case is solved in the eyes of the public, or do you think there are still people actively seeking the true killer? Well, definitely, people are still seeking the true killer. All you have to do is go on Reddit. All you have to do is look at the books. Look at Eli Frankel. Look at Sisters in Death. And there's another one. William Mann also has a book coming out about the Black Dahlia case. And when he contacted me, he said, I'm not going to try to solve the case. Well, now the book blurb is that he solved the case. So, yeah, I mean, I would think in terms of human behavior, people cannot stand an unanswered question. They just can't tolerate it. They can't tolerate having no answer. And so in that respect, a bad answer is better than no answer for a lot of people. I mean, that's one thing I've learned in researching is that a bad answer is better than no answer. And again, yeah, people, as I said, go on Reddit, go on Wikipedia. There's all, people. It's folklore of who could have done it. Okay, let's see. Did Elizabeth attend her sister's wedding? No. Elizabeth Short was either in Massachusetts or Florida. I forget which now. Let's see. Let me go back to Masako here. When do I plan to publish my book on the Black Dahlia case? Have you already started discussions with your publisher? Okay. My interactions with the book publishing industry, understand, I come from the newspaper business. We have nightly deadlines. Okay. We got to make the deadline. We got to come out. Is the story ready? Is it not? Whatever. The book publishing industry is a completely different beast. I have talked to a bunch of agents, a bunch of editors. The typical thing is, an editor will say, hey, I understand you're working on a book, the Black Dahlia case. I will send them the standard, outline and sample chapter, and never hear from them again. It's very typical. So I just keep working on it. It's at this point, the publishing industry is as beleaguered as the newspaper industry, in terms of the newspaper business is collapsing around us, and so is the book publishing industry. And I think these days, what publishers there are books being published that are good, but I think there's a lot of it where what publishers want are books that will sell. If they're accurate, oh, that's nice. If they're well written, oh, good. But they want books that sell. Okay. And if an author has a built-in fan base or he has a following, which is why James Ellroy can write utter garbage, and there is a hardcore base that will buy that no matter what. So at this point, there are a number of avenues for a writer at this point that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago in terms of a publishing house. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. Let's see. Who originally made the mistake that Betty's middle name is Ann? She doesn't have one. Oh, that's a great story. West Magazine in the 70s published a big article by a guy named Todd Faulkner, and it's called "Farewell, My Black Dahlia." I want to say it was 1972. It might have been a little bit later. I'm relying on my memory here. Anyway, there was an article in West Magazine called "Farewell, My Black Dahlia," and it wasn't in the story. It was in the introduction. It was in the blurb to that story. Whoever wrote that, referred to her as Elizabeth Ann Short, and the paper never corrected it. And so that has kind of gotten pulled into, it's in the FBI file and everything else. But yeah, it was from that story. And so you can check and see all the places that the Elizabeth Ann thing came from. Now, I promised somebody I was going to answer a question here. Labyrinth, are you still there? Tell me you're still there. Okay. Okay. Where are those questions? Okay. What is the possibility that the killer was a woman? Okay. Now, putting aside my suspicion that it's Walter Bailey, let's put that aside. What is the possibility that the killer was a woman? Well, when you look at what was done to Elizabeth Short, well, okay, first of all, John Douglas's take was this was a man's crime. And I tend to agree with that. I mean, I will defer to him on that. When you're dealing with human behavior, I suppose there are always going to be variations. But again, I would say it was probably a man's crime. It's just so, what was done to him was so deranged. What was done to her was so crazy and deranged. I'm pretty sure it was a guy. Theoretically, maybe, but doubtful. I don't think so. The other question is, what are the alibis of the prime suspects in the Black Dahlia case? I can't seem to find them. Okay, here it is real fast. The prime suspect is an invention of Steve Hodel, who likes to say his dad was the prime suspect. There were only 3 who you could call prime suspects in the Black Dahlia case. First one was Red Manley. What was his alibi? He was playing cards with his wife and a couple of buddies. So he's eliminated, number one. Number two, Leslie Dillon. He was eliminated after an exhaustive, and it's in here. Leslie Dillon was in San Francisco when Elizabeth Short was killed after an exhaustive investigation. The third so-called prime suspect would be Joseph Dumais. That was the first time that the Los Angeles Times put the Black Dahlia case on the cover. Was this guy back in Fort Dix who claimed that he had killed the Black Dahlia. And of course, the Army tracks kept perfect track of where he had been. And he wasn't anywhere near Los Angeles. So those are the three. Other than that, there weren't any prime suspects. Not really. And it's a stretch to call them the prime suspect. George Hodel was never the prime suspect, except in the parallel universe of Steve Hodel, which I call Steve World. Okay. Let's see. Got time for, it's 11. Oh, Instagram, you got to go away or I'm going to lose you. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Instagram only saves for an hour. I learned that the hard way. Okay. Masako, did I answer your questions okay? Did you get what you wanted? Okay. All right, good. Let's see. Female killer. Okay, I took care of that one. Death of the secretary. Okay. Well, that's a George Hodel question. So I'm going to skip it. Do you think she was held captive during that missing week, flying under the radar? We don't know. No one. And I think that's the tough part of it. Oh no. Thelma Todd was definitely an accidental death. Thelma Todd was drunk, hit her head on the steering wheel, and passed out. And that was not a mob thing at all. No. That was strictly an accident. No. Anyway, sorry. Not a mob thing, not staged to be a suicide. That was legit. Yes. Did Brian Carr pass away? Yes. Okay. Do I think she was held captive during a missing week? We don't know. We don't know where she was. All right, friends. That is that. And we are going to end it for today. Thanks so much for coming. It's always a pleasure. As I said, the time went fast. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I have put on, people ask about, chapters and whatnot. That's supposed to be automatic. I tick the little box or whatever, so YouTube will make the chapters automatic. I don't know. My goal is not to be a YouTube influencer, So anyway, okay. We'll do this in a month, which is June, what did I say? June 3rd. We'll do it again June 3rd. See you then.